Right, I'm going to start. So, I set up a company, a social enterprise a few years ago called Liverpool Community Renewables. And then we became... Next slide. Yeah, perfect. So we call Liverpool City Region. You know, so we're now. And so, we try and do projects that are, reduce carbon emissions or raise awareness about climate change. And these are my two lovely colleagues, Luke Evans and Eddie Taylor, who are the other two directors of the company. So, like many ideas, so what the idea was, and like many of the ideas that I kind of try and develop, I just copy off someone else. So originally, this idea was from Rossendale Valley Energy. So they developed a net zero terrace streets project, and they've been working on this for a few years. Yeah. So those are the terrace streets they're looking to retrofit there. So, you know, it's pretty standard. That's Rossendale Valley is in Lancashire. It's a bit north of Greater Manchester, a bit of countryside surrounded by Blackburn, Accrington, Hebden Bridge, around that kind of area, if anyone's familiar with it. And I found out about it through my connection to Kate Gilmartin. She's running a Community Energy Award. She's like a community energy legend. And so they're like 2 or 3 years ahead of where we are. So I was very interested in this approach because I live in a terraced house in a terrace street, a big terrace street in L8. Asbridge Street. I tried to find a picture of my street on my phone, and that was the only one I could find. So not only that, I live in a housing cooperative called the Old Housing Cooperative, and so there's 2 streets that they have houses on, Asbridge Street and Midson Street, and they're big long terrace streets, mainly one 2-bed terraces, and so it's kind of an ideal location to try and develop this project. And I've been there since 2011, and ever since then, so that's 13 years now, I've been trying to get them interested in retrofit and renewables and that kind of thing, with very limited success. So initially we got this grant, which was an Innovation in Communities grant. So I found like the way of dealing with the committee, the best way I could do that, if I could get money in so it didn't cost them anything, then I'm happy to kind of have work done to look into energy efficiency. So we got this one, which is Innovations in Communities project, which was £7,500. And with that we managed to pay to have an options appraisal and business case done by Seam Consulting, or Seam Connect, I think they're called now. So they're very active in the community energy space, and they do a lot of work looking at renewables and community energy and those kind of things. And they're also based in Liverpool. They've got an office in Liverpool, so they're pretty handy to kind of have a connection with, because they can do it. I'm working on more projects with them now after having done this already. So in terms of our houses in the terrace streets, in the 2 streets, the Old Housing Cooperative is a registered social landlord, and that means they have to maintain reasonable standards of energy efficiency in their properties. So that's EPC for my property, and most of them are sort of around that, C's and D's. But I think that's a little bit, to be honest, that's a bit high. I don't think it's that high, to be honest. I think they've slightly overcalculated what that is. But so that does mean that there's only so much that can be done to those properties, because a lot of the work's already been done. They've got double glazing, they've had loft insulation, they've got decent boilers. So the Seam Connect work, I'll skip back a little bit, I've gone ahead of myself, was looked at solar PV, air source heat pumps and retrofit. And ultimately what they found was solar PV wasn't that expensive to install if they installed it on all the properties of the cooperative, and it would save members, everyone living in those houses would save £188 a year if they did that. And that was based on only using 70,000 kilowatt hours of the 170 kilowatt hours that would be produced if they did that. Air source heat pumps, so switching from gas boilers to air source heat pumps, did not deliver savings on energy in the models that they put into that report, which is kind of important. And retrofit, they modelled a few different types of retrofit approach. One quite high level, and then sort of different variations of that. So on one, they kind of looked at if you spent like £3,500 on retrofit, and then another £6,000, another £15,000, which if anyone knows anything about retrofit, is not a lot of money to be spent on retrofit, basically on improving the energy efficiency of those properties. And they would deliver annual savings of about £200 to £315. So in terms of the payback that people would get, it was good, but it wasn't massive. Okay, yeah, so as you can see, yeah. Oh, no, that's fine. That's good, go for it. This is still from my old EPC. My EPC was done in 2009, and I just want to have a little bit of, let's have a little nostalgia for 2009 prices. It used to cost me £430 for heating and energy in my house in 2009. It's now £1,200, and it produces 2 tons of CO2. So obviously, so these are the two elements we're looking at. It's like, how do we save money for our members, especially now with the prices being what they are, and how do we get those emissions down to as close to zero as possible? Okay, so in terms of the scene report, one of the things they looked at was if they did a combination of solar PV and air source heat pumps, and then retrofit on top of that, so that would, like, if that could get us to net zero. And if we wanted to do the PV and air source heat pump combination, that'd be £850,000 to do them all. And a decent retrofit would be another £500,000, so it was like 1.2, 1.3 million to do that, which obviously our housing cooperative, although it does actually have money, that would like completely wipe out all its savings, so they wouldn't be interested in doing that. So obviously, how we fund that is the big question. So the Net Zero Terraces project in Rossendale was looking into the viability of shared loop ground source heat pump systems. And this is a different project. This is the one in Cornwall. It's in Scythians. Just kind of get some water. There. It's called Heat the Streets. And so they did this in a village in Cornwall where they tried to replace all the gas heating systems with ground source heat pumps in a shared loop. It's not new technology, but it's a bit niche, so it's been around for a long time. And there's loads of examples all around the country you can find. I think it's normally kind of commercial rather than residential. So I bumped into some people from Kenza at an event, and they agreed to do a feasibility study, very brief, very kind of baseline feasibility study into whether these shared loop heat loop networks would work on our 2 streets. So you can see the kind of stuff there. It's basically about drilling boreholes down, and air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps are effectively the same kind of idea. Big ambient source of temperature concentrated into a smaller space. So they reckon they could do like 80 boreholes in the 2 streets, and it would be viable. So this is what they said. I'm going to read this bit because it's quite complicated. So the solution that's proposed is that each house is fitted with a Kenza shoebox ground source heat pump connected to radiators and a hot water tank. So effectively, it's the same as the gas heating system. They're heating up the hot water, but like nowadays, most people don't have a hot water tank, but it'll be heating up hot water in a tank, and that'll be going around radiators, and it does your hot water as well. Each property will benefit from an individual ground source heat pump. The tenant will be responsible for paying their own bills and energy associated with the operation of the heat pump, so you don't have to do like monitoring and billing for that in that kind of situation yourself. The ground source heat pump is a renewable heating system. The ground source heat pump extracts low temperature solar energy stored in the ground using buried pipework and compresses this energy into a high temperature. Heat naturally flows from warmer to cooler places. A ground source heat pump exploits this physics by circulating cold fluid through a ground array pipework in the ground. It absorbs low-grade surrounding energy from the external heat source, which is the ground. And then it compresses and condenses this free energy into a higher temperature and transfers it into the property, heating the hot water system. Having surrendered the absorbed energy from the ground, the heat pump the fluid then circulates back into the system to absorb more heat from the ground and continue the process. So that's kind of sort of the basics of that. So in terms of, in terms of the kind of how the model, how it would work, they want to try and do it so it's sort of like an energy services company. So someone like the energy services company would own the ground array. The debt would be on the ground array, the pipe work, and then that can be then paid back over a longer period of time, like 40 years, and you collect kind of the payback through standing charges or something of that nature. So eventually I managed to get some funding via the North West Energy Hub, or the North West Net Zero Hub, as it now is, which is run by Lancashire County Council, sits under, they kind of manage it all, but it's basically money from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. So we got stage 2 funding, which is to do like really detailed feasibility and kind of business case work. So I found in the back of the report that Ken's had written, I think it's on here. Oh, okay, so this was the bid we put in, this is the basis of the bid we put in. So like the Committee of the Alt, we're aware of net zero and the targets we know we need to get there. We're a registered social landlord. There's net zero targets in the UK, there's net zero targets in the city region, the Liverpool City Council has net zero targets, so we're aware that we need to look at what we're going to do with our properties to get to net zero. But we want to make sure that what we do is going to improve the lives and well-being of our members as we make that transition. A condition of the funding was that 51% of the kind of of the renewable energy we generate, or renewable infrastructure associated with this project, has to be 51% owned by the alt or by like a social enterprise. So that's kind of, which is good for me. I'm in favour of that anyway. So that's kind of a good part of the project. So the funding is called the Community Energy Fund. So we were successful in getting Community Energy Fund funding. Yeah. So this was at the back of the Kenza report, and they were like, okay, so we've done like a really basic kind of feasibility, and they said like you can probably do a ground source heat pump network around where you are. This is the kind of stuff you're going to need to do to develop it up to the point where you could actually be almost ready to install. That's what you need to do to get to the point where you'd be ready to kind of deploy the system. So basically, I used that to write the bid. So I was like, this is what we need to do. Let's just kind of go out and try and find people to do that work. And put together a really good team of people. So People Powered Retrofit. Is anyone from People Powered Retrofit here today? I thought they were speaking, but they're not speaking.
Someone's coming at the end with a story.
Okay. So there, as people probably know, Marianne, she worked for them, came out of Carbon and all this kind of stuff. So one of the things we need to do is quite a lot of community engagement around this, because a lot of people, it's a new idea, they were come across it before. So there's going to be they're going to do basically a lot of community engagement around this idea, get people used to the idea of switching from gas to electric heating. But also, they're going to do kind of a lot of the baseline work, because we haven't really looked in detail at the energy efficiency of our properties for quite a long time. EPCs are quite a blunt measure. My EPC that I showed you there is from 2009. It ran out in 2019, so it's not even valid anymore. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to actually look at the houses. Like a job I was doing recently, I was working for Energy Project Plus, and I only really discovered that cavity wall insulation does deteriorate after a while. So even if you have cavity wall insulation done many years ago, sometimes it needs to be replaced. There's all kinds of stuff like that I think we really need to get into the detail of, to see what we need to do to up the energy efficiency of our properties before we can then do the kind of the heat loop stuff. So we've got Scene involved again. They're going to do project management. They're also going to look at solar PV. So we want to look at putting solar PV in combination with the ground loop network, ground source heat loop network, because that will then power the heat pump. So we're just trying to work out how that would interface with that. And what else we do? And then obviously the retrofit element, People Powered Retrofit are looking at. So we're going to be looking at how we can reduce the energy demand of the property and the heat demand of the property. Solar combined with this ground source heat network. Locogen are going to be doing most of the technical work, so anything to do with the boreholes and sizing the system and all that kind of stuff. They're going to subcontract out quite a lot of that work from what I understand, but they're in charge of the kind of the more technical side of things. And Kenza aren't involved at all, so Kenza, who did that initial scoping for us, we spoke to them, they didn't want to be involved in this side of things, they just want to deliver the project if we ever get that far. And Abundance Investment are going to do the kind of the finances, the business case. So in terms of how much, like in the feasibility study that Kenza did, they estimated it'd be like £3.8 million, something like that, to do this, put this system in. So in terms of working out how you get the investment, where you find the investment, and how you pay it back and all that kind of stuff, we're going to work with Abundance on that one. I mean, Kate's already done some work on that, so hopefully we're not kind of starting from scratch. So yeah, I know, go back. So we were successful in July. We put this bid in, we got it. They said like, okay, you've been successful, congratulations. I then went back to the committee of the housing cooperative, who have been involved in the process all the way through. I showed them the grant funding agreement, and they went, oh no, what's this? And because they've never done funding bids before, so they were a bit freaked out, basically, because it looked like quite a serious legal agreement, and there were questions about liabilities and stuff like that. And partly it's bad timing, so we got the funding agreed just after our last meeting in July, and then we don't meet in August, and then October we weren't quorate, so we haven't been able to agree to accept the funding's there. We just need to agree to take it, but we're having a little bit of trouble getting the cooperative to agree to take the money, which is an unusual situation which I haven't been in before. But hopefully, if we do this next year, I'll be able to bring everyone along and we can tell you about what's actually happened when we've done the project. Yeah, so the main issue they had was that they were kind of worried that we'd have to pay up front. Basically, we'd have to pay people up front and then get the money in from the funders and then pay out, which we don't have to do. We can pay in arrears. But anyway, so we're nearly there. We just need to get that final agreement, and that's it. Thank you very much.